All right, we can get started. Thanks for joining, everyone. Um, let's start with last week's AIs. And we had a few. Just a second. Yeah, so we wanted to communicate regarding the Docker Hub rate limits and the CI flakiness um, that we saw. So that was included in my summary this week. Um, Note to projects to consider alternatives, basically. I am not sure how many people read those summaries, but I feel like I mean, if there are any suggestions on how else um, to do this, please let me know. Maybe a separate email thread, maybe one in case people are not paying attention to a line item inside the summary. I can just drop a link to our meeting. All right, and the next one was, I think, G-Man was taking an AI on Ubuntu Noble Migration. And this was about reaching out to projects to basically tell them that their jobs are currently broken ever since we've made changes to the default sorry, the node set in the base jobs that a lot of them are depending on. And he did this. There is a separate email thread, and we did manage to mention it also in the TC summary. But there's a link to Ghanshyam's post to the mailing list with 9 projects that he was calling out as having issues with the Git, and that's this one. Um, I'm not sure if the discussion has picked up elsewhere, but at the least, what projects need to be doing is to pin the node set so that they can have their CI running and merge any changes that they're probably fixing along the way for Noble. And let's do one more. So the last AI that we did take was the Postgres SQL. Um, Support documentation, and it was basically again another communication thing to the project team saying that Neutron and Ironic have now dropped their jobs, which included Postgres, which means that if there are any other teams that depend on these projects, it's possible that you're going to start seeing some failures since the projects upstream are not testing them. Uh, and so we've, clarified that we don't really have the bandwidth to test with PostgreSQL across all of these projects, and that's something that if folks are interested in, they can backfill. There's also this old resolution from the TC that pretty much called out that same situation in 2017. I've moved this item to the TC tracker, and we'll hear more about it. once we isolate those documents that need to be updated and so on. You did see some more discussion after the TC meeting last week on the same channel, but likely there are many other places. So we'll round them up and address those. Any other action items that anybody else was tracking? All right, sounds like none. Let's move on to the other topics today. So I'm going to take a call today to just move up one of the topics and move the regular items that we discussed after that topic that was added. So let's move to that one if there are no objections. And this gives us some time to keep, to discuss the new topics rather than trying to keep them to the end. So let's get this topic started. So Prickler added this, and as you're aware, he does not join these video meetings. Um, and speaking of which, we didn't really revisit the video meetings at the PTC, but that's another topic. But let's try to take his notes. He's put some up for us to discuss. So there is a resolution that the TC pursued in 2023, and it was about migrating all of the older stable branches to actually terming them unmaintained, and in effect changing the stable branch maintenance policies that we had, or drawing them closer to reality. And there are some aspects of that resolution that Frickler is saying that we were not having enough traction on, or that we're letting slide. And so he'd like for us to discuss those things and see if there are if there's somebody that can help clean things up and make us more truer to that resolution. So first of the things, it says that the but by default only the latest unmaintained branch is kept, but for this is not implemented. The default for Git repositories is to stay in place unless some action is taken. So I think this refers to the latest. When a new branch is eligible, the unmaintained liaison must opt in to keep all the previous branches active. Okay, so yeah, this is a part in that resolution about unmaintained branches that basically says that we only ever have one unmaintained branch, and until a unmaintained liaison from each project is piping up to say, hey, we would like to keep the other unmaintained branch alive. We would go through the process of EOL, from what I understand. And Frickler's saying that this is not being maintained. This is not being followed. Yes, Jeremy.
Yeah, I think the bigger concern with that is that no process was defined for how we would solicit volunteers. And so, since there's been no defined process to find out who's volunteering to keep the branches open, there's been no appetite from the release managers to go ahead and close the branches down for lack of volunteers because of there not being a process to ask people to volunteer in the first place. And we basically missed defining that in the earlier work on the unmaintained resolutions. We kind of defined like how the unmaintained caretakers would like group management for them and stuff like that, but there was not really any sort of messaging process decided on for how to like at each release, do we post to the mailing list and say this is a call for volunteers, or how does that play out?
Eventually, this of process has been already raised even during discussion of unmaintained process, but it was said that we will define it later on, and that later on basically never happened.
In the I mean, since we lack that process right now, what would we do to remediate? Like, we have a proliferation of branches at this point. I think, he brings it up in later points that the oldest unmaintained branch we have is Victoria, and we are not even sure anybody benefits from keeping it around. And with all of these Zool errors that are there's also aspects that when somebody initiated the cleanup, it keeps getting delayed because we keep discussing uh, what to do about it.
Yes, sure, but there is, I mean, we can hardly define a point when someone may be caring about branch. So for Victoria, I will tend to agree. But if we talk about yoga, for instance, what we should do with it, because we actually should it also to move to end of life because it's like third or something branch, but um, as far as I recall, there was in the latest survey, usage of yoga was still quite high at the same time. So I can imagine there be people around who might want to take care of it. And this is where we would need the process to be in place to decide what to do.
Are you saying that a lot of people were depending on Victoria, or was that yoga that you're talking
On
about?
yoga.
Oh, okay.
But like question is where to draw the line.
Yeah.
And I would be cautious with looking at the user survey because we may have knowledge that many people are using it, but we don't know if they are using it from upstream branches or from distro, for example, or some other way. So they may still not benefit from keeping it
Yeah.
live upstream, right? So
Yeah. I mean, yeah, indeed, that's my concern. I mean, I wonder why we should be continuing to use those branches, because even if people continue to look at Victoria, I wonder why they need to continue to have the specific Victoria branch upstream.
Yeah.
So, but maybe we should be discussing, maybe we should be asking this question. Like, I mean, I mean, we could be saying, for example, okay, that's a question. like why you would want to continue to have this specific branch, and if basically nobody is able to explain why, then like next PTG we could be then saying, okay, basically because of people didn't provide a way to explain, then basically we could be then modifying this.
Okay. Jeremy?
Yeah, I guess with the user survey indicating high levels of usage for a particular branch, I'm unclear on how that discovery translates to us finding caretakers for those branches, because the user survey is mostly anonymous. So like we can't necessarily use the user survey to find who might be interested in taking care of those branches, or is it more that the technical committee would consider just telling the release team to go ahead and eliminate those branches on the assumption that there's not going to be anyone volunteering to take care of them if the numbers are low? But that still doesn't solve how do we find the volunteer caretakers for the branches whose usage is not low.
Let me please elaborate on this bit and why kind of. So, as far as I recall, the idea was that it will be up to like, so basically projects can volunteer to keep more branches if they feel that user base and support is there. But we don't have a process for that, so we don't actually know that question. And as you said, we cannot call for volunteers because we don't have a process. And what I was trying to say is that we cannot just say, yeah, let's kill all branches because there could be someone who want to take care about them. If it makes any sense.
To some extent, I mean, we kind of made it a time-based thing. I mean, following what we had previously with the you know it was not the unmaintained branches, but the extended maintenance branches, right? So we said we're only going to have X number of extended maintenance branches. So that's why that made it sort of easier to say, okay, we're going to EOL this the next when the next extended maintenance branch comes in. So I guess the thing with unmaintained is broken in a couple of things, that there are a lot of unmaintained branches and we don't have that transition strategy. Now that Antelope is going unmaintained, it's already for most projects and maybe a few stragglers here and there. But you can consider Antelope is the latest unmaintained branch, but we have not done anything about Victoria. Um, so if we were to follow that same pattern, I mean, what Dr. Jens is proposing over here is totally acceptable, correct? We are just pushing out the last unmaintained branch that we have. Uh, if we can make that decision, maybe then the next one requires the process that you're talking about.
Yeah, so for instance, with my PTL hat on, I probably love to have yoga still on unmaintained for OpenStack Ansible at very least. Because I see this as, so I know that users are still using it, and I know that it could be a path for them to get out of very, very old crap to something new, because we already did like this test support for slab upgrades from Yoga to Antelope. And basically then they can kind of upgrade to Caracal in just one upgrade. So probably potentially I want to keep Yoga and Antelope, but drop that and all before Yoga. But there is no process I can follow to express this like will.
I see. Uh, do you have a proposal there for those sort of things? You're saying that in your project you have, I mean, with the PTL hat on, we're basically saying that you care about X branch, but not X plus one, but you might care about X plus two, and so on. So if you were to make an individual choice for the OpenStack Ansible project to keep those branches alive, how does that work with the rest of the projects that OSA integrates with?
So this is something that wasn't clear for me from the beginning. If we roll back a time a little bit when we were discussing maintain branches, I was leaving a comment that I don't really know how this should actually work. But I mean,
World of pain, I would think.
yeah.
Oh, okay, Jeremy.
So
Sorry, go ahead.
I
Sorry, don't want to interrupt you. Go ahead. Go ahead. Finish your thought.
no, maybe Jeremy has a suggestion, so I will let him speak.
Okay.
Yeah. I guess two points on that. One, from a policy perspective, what we've written for Slurp versus not Slurp and unmaintained, it might make sense for, in the specific case of yoga, for the TC to declare that for purposes of unmaintained policy, we could treat yoga like a Slurp release because we did a dry run for Slurp support and tested upgrades on all projects from yoga to Antelope. So like your idea of having yoga unmaintained but dropping Zed would be in line with the unmaintained policy if we pretended that yoga was a Slurp release, because the policy currently says that we can keep Slurp releases in unmaintained branch state, but that the not Slurp releases in between them fall out as soon as the transition from maintained happens. So that would make some sense, but might need the TC to explicitly declare that yoga can be treated as a Slurp release for that purpose. The other item was, as far as how do you deal with some projects keeping a branch open, other projects that they depend on EOLing those branches, that already happens today. And yes, it is painful, but effectively what you end up doing is overriding the checkouts for all of your required projects and your jobs to the EOL tag for those dependencies. For the specific branches that those EOL tags represent when you're testing on those branches.
Yeah, but then I mean, we're also saying that like only Slurp can go on unmaintained, and we keep only one unmaintained branch of Slurp, and now we will have two unmaintained Slurps, right? Because it's also Antelope and Yoga kind of. So it's I mean, this workaround is saying that the DC will take a decision that will treat yoga as like Slurp in terms of maintained. It doesn't work out, I guess, anyway.
Well, the policy allows us to have as many Slurp releases continuing unmaintained branches as there are volunteers to keep them alive. It's just the not Slurps in between them that automatically go to end of life.
But how we define if we have volunteers?
Yes, well, that was my original question. Where do you find the volunteers? Is there a roster you would track them in? How do they express their desire to volunteer to do that? And how do you evaluate whether or not they're renewing their volunteer state for the next cycle, etc.?
Yeah, exactly the problem.
So we have an unmaintained core team, but that's a subset of the release team and practically a lot of random project representatives, right? So they don't really have a structure or anything. They don't really meet and discuss these things. Everything probably happens if somebody starts a discussion on the release.
Well,
Yeah.
sorry. No, go ahead. I mean, I will reply after that.
Yeah, so I feel like, I mean, if you were trying to find a process like that, you would probably need to consult with the unmaintained core team, um, and we can probably prescribe what to do, but I feel like we handed it off to an unmaintained core team, which may be inactive at this point, but it exists.
I mean, when we started having like unmaintained branches, we already said basically if you want to use this specific branch, just tell us, and basically we could have this specific team for you if you want. Again, my question is why people didn't use that. Again, it's related to the fact that I think I wonder how many people really need to continue to use this branch, because if people really need to have this branch upstream, then indeed they will be saying, okay, basically I also need to be able to accept this backport. So I think it's like the same question. If we only have like the release team that's like is the course for the maintenance branches, that's just because nobody asked for it, right?
Well, I personally like like again with also hat on. We just added part of OSA course to unmaintained team because people volunteered to be there. But it's not a generic unmaintained team because we didn't want to be responsible for all projects in unmaintained branches, but specifically to what we are responsible for. So, but again, we were advised against it because unmaintained was is something that works differently. But I mean, I don't know.
Yeah,
It was actually raising some confusion about how this actually intended to work, even.
there was an encouragement for folks to join the unmaintained core across all of the projects, but I can imagine like a lot of project teams chose to have an unmaintained core for their own projects because they were not familiar with anything else, or they didn't have the motivation.
To care about everything else, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So this particular resolution that started this discussion also says, I mean, we're coming back to that same point that we don't have a clear step-by-step process when transitioning a a branch through these phases. We know what the phases are, but we don't know the process. I guess the ask is, um, if someone has, like for example, we discovered a couple of motivations here. We know some people care about the yoga branch. The user survey cannot be used as a source of truth, but it can be a little bit of a motivation for us to decide what to do. But we know some people might volunteer to keep the yoga branch alive. But the same cannot be said for Victoria, Xena, and so on. I feel like the decision can be easier over there for these older branches, and so we shouldn't delay that and make it a ongoing problem. So I feel like we can sunset those branches. Is there some objection to these, which is, in my view, a very low-hanging fruit and does not really go against anything um, that we've been discussing? If there is, I mean, we are going to probably send a mailing list post asking for folks that may be affected with this, and just take the route of sunsetting Victoria and Xena. And how does that sound? Oh, sorry. Actually, I missed a branch, didn't I? So it's Victoria, Wallaby, Xena, I think. Any objections here in this room?
Let's maybe write a mailing list and ask if like there are volunteers to step in and raise with that also raise awareness about that volunteers are welcome in a maintain process um, before we just push it like yeah merge a patch at very least.
Okay. No, it is certainly quite nice to see security bug fixes being merged, and I think some of the motivation was that some folks are maintaining older branches, but at this point downstream only within distros and so on, they probably are easing the process for themselves as well by merging them upstream. So thanks for that call out, Jeremy. All right. Um, now to the next part of the question is to define a process for the other branches, so that we don't have to make this decision each time. And actually, that is the alternative. We make this decision each time. We make it a painful discussion each time around, rather than having an automated, sorry, uh, a a processor that we agree upon.
Well, if you decide to select a discussion each time, it still kind of doesn't hurt to have a process which will state that we need to have a painful discussion each time.
Yeah.
It still we should be kind of written somewhere on paper.
Okay. Makes sense. And is that something we want to discuss today, or table that discussion until we've cleaned up I mean all these three branches that we don't seem to have a problem with. I am saying that like it can happen tomorrow, but we are going to start with a mailing list post, and I'm hopeful.
I would probably table it to an RC meeting and maybe when a little bit more people are around from TC as well, because we have an absence list today.
Okay. Anybody else has any other thoughts? All right. If not, let's move on to the next topic. I thank Frinkler for seeding this topic, and we'll see if there is any other discussion that can be had between this meeting and the next one. But I'll be sure to bring this back. And so the next topic here is a check on gate health. This is a regularly scheduled CI topic. Is anybody noticing any flakiness or any new behaviors on the CI that needs to be brought up?
I just spotted that potentially all Horizon plugins are broken after migration to Ubuntu Noble. But no flakiness at release.
Ditto here. I mean, I was looking at some changes. Maybe we have some guest kernel issue due to some network problem. But for the moment, I'm not able to say about the right problem.
In what kind of jobs?
Good question. Any kind of Tempest job, I would say no.
Okay.
But for the moment, this is not like this is not like a priority. I mean, we only have this kind of guest kernel issue for network only for a few of the checks. So for the moment, it's not really a problem. That's why what I'm saying is that. But because we changed, because basically we upgraded CROS, sorry. We were also looking at the guest kernel issues. As far as I know, the previous kernel issues we were saying are no longer here, but we will see. But when I was looking at some issue, then I found basically I saw some kind of kernel issue when I was looking at the job. I saw some guest kernel. I mean, not some kind of guest kernel problem, but basically I was seeing that basically we are not able to SSH to the guest. But anyway, let's not discuss that now. I will try to see whether it's a right problem or just something because of some time we need. We'll see.
Okay. Thank you. Clark?
I just wanted to follow up on the Docker Hub thing from last week and say I think that the mitigation of not funneling everything through the proxy in each region has helped, and I've also seen several projects kind of work to mitigate by looking at resources in other places and so on. We still see the errors happening, but it's definitely a lot less impactful, I think, right now, at least for where I'm sitting, like working on projects like Zool and OpenDev. The frequency of the errors is much less. And then the other thing I wanted to note is there has been a couple people trying to build CentOS 10 stream images via Disk Image Builder, and what they have run into is you cannot boot CentOS 10 and presumably RHEL 10 on several of our clouds, and the reason is due to the x86-64 v3 requirement for CPU instruction set in the new distro release. I guess I'm calling this out now as like a potential future gate issue if people are trying to work with things that have those CPU requirements, and it's kind of like we're kind of stuck in the middle because it's basically it's the distros and the clouds making these decisions, and we just have to live with what we get, right? And so I don't know that there's anything for us to do there. I just wanted to call that out.
It does potentially factor into future choices for supported test runtimes for releases. So like if the TC were to decide for 2025.2 F code name release cycle, we were going to be targeting CentOS 10 as a platform, we might be stuck if we can't boot that on any of our cloud providers.
Yeah, I think that the OpenMetal and the Rackspace Flex clouds are the only two, maybe Vexhost, but we don't use Vexhost for regular nodes. So for regular, quote unquote, regular test nodes, I think OpenMetal and Rackspace Flex might be the only two that meet the CPU requirements. So currently, so yeah. That was all I had. I just wanted to make people aware of that as like a future-looking gate issue problem.
Thank you. I was not aware. Is there any any links or something that you have that you can throw in, or any
there's
information there?
There's the disk image builder change that they've been working on, but I don't know. I mean, presumably Red Hat has published that this is going to be a requirement for Red Hat 10 and consequently CentOS 10. And a lot of the clouds aren't very public about like what instructions each node is going to get. You basically have to boot a node and go check, and it's not always the same. If you boot 10 nodes, you might get 2 or 3 different sets of CPU flags. So as far as documentation on the cloud side goes, it's very iffy. But yeah, anyway.
Okay, thank you. Amy?
Yeah, if there's requirements that we're thinking of, which obviously we're running into, I can try to find out what's coming in CentOS Stream 10 that might affect us. Just let me know.
That might be helpful actually, because we're seeing it in the CI, but we don't know what they are exactly and how we can define it to the providers. Right.
Yeah, so we know that the requirement is apparently you need x86 64 v3, whatever that there's a v1, there's a v2, and it's a collection of CPU features that are like a baseline feature set for various things. And v3 includes, I think it's AVX in particular, that a lot of clouds don't provide AVX instruction support. And v3 says no, AVX is part of v3, and since that's the target that CentOS 10 is being built against, when you try to then run code on top of clouds that don't provide AVX, it explodes. So I think that part is understood. It's more just thinking about, how do we navigate the effect on us? Do we say we can't support CentOS 10? Do we push back on Red Hat and say, hey, you need to be aware that there is still a lot of stuff out there that doesn't have AVX and supports this v3? Do you go to the cloud providers and say, hey, this is really important now because distros are making decisions that require it? Maybe you do some combination of all three. I don't know. It's more that I wanted to raise awareness as like this is a gate issue that hasn't really made the pain be felt yet. It's very much like this is coming down the road. Right now, it's okay.
Yeah.
I'll ask around and see what I can do.
Yeah, thank you both. I guess part of the thing would be that, on the Red Hat side, RDO will have jobs that will need to run on CentOS Stream 10, and also the installer stuff and things that Red Hat's building on the side on GitHub. Those are all running on a combination of clouds, including Vexhost. So I suppose this has been communicated in some sense. So I guess we would probably find that providers might match up to it eventually, but we'll have a pain explaining that to project teams that are relying on CentOS nodes, for instance, and how we have to work through that. Thanks. That is the TIB change. All right. Anything else on this topic? Any other gate issues? If not, let's move on to the next topic, the TC tracker. I suppose the biggest updates here would be the couple of things that we are making active progress on in terms of goals. So we can open that up. And you know the status with the Noble migration. Are there any updates to share with anything else that we have on the tracker? And the eventlet goal has been making lots of progress. They've been having regular meetings. These are bi-weekly meetings, and there is a lot that's happening in a lot of different projects in terms of both exploration as well as low-hanging fruits that can be addressed and so on. And as you can tell, like I mean, there is also some discussion on the requirements bump that was recently proposed. So I guess we don't have to discuss all of that here, but one thing that the TC would need to do um, is to check out that goal that's being rewritten. And for the vast part, I've also not gone with my roll call vote over there, but I can state that this is much simpler, and a lot of the reason for the simplicity is that that discussion moved elsewhere. So all of that massive amount of text that we were seeing in the original goal has now moved to a wiki, which can be edited and further you know uh, impacted based on what people are doing and what choices they're making. And the goal itself is going to be very simple to say, hey, we're trying to get rid of eventlet through all of these various means that you will see on the wiki page, because that's what the teams are deciding to do. And there is no one single solution that we're going to have. So it feels much simpler now, but we definitely need a lot more eyes on this. There's actually two changes that are waiting to merge. One is that this rework, and the other is to select that goal as a TC goal. Anything else on the tracker that folks want to bring out besides that eventlet thing? All right, taking silence as no. Let's move on. We have 6 minutes. Let's move to open discussion.
I guess if nobody else has anything, just a reminder that the nominations for the individual member representatives for the Open Infra Foundation Board of Directors are still open for a little while longer. So if anyone was thinking about possibly running for the Board of Directors or wants to nominate someone else or help bolster some of the existing nominations, because everyone who runs needs 10 nominations from members to make it onto the ballot. Please pay attention to the emails that have been circulating about the upcoming board elections.
Thank you. And you said 10 nominations?
Yep.
Okay.
10.
Yep. And there are a lot of candidates that are floating right now that could be on the ballot if they just got one or two more people seconding their nomination.
And we'll see that as candidates not yet on the ballot on that page.
Yeah, once you get
Okay.
your 10, you move to the top. And when you're still waiting for your 10, you're on the bottom.
Perfect. Thanks for that call out. All right. 4 minutes to go. Any other topics to add to the open discussion or to the meeting minutes? All right. Looks like we can wrap this up a couple of minutes early. Thank you everyone for joining. I'll see you folks on IRC and on this meeting next week on IRC.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.
Here.
Yeah.